When humble janitor Maya Rodriguez saves the life of tech mogul Alexander Reid with emergency CPR, she never imagines she'll become the fixation of one of the most powerful men in the city. But can genuine connection flourish when their worlds and the secrets between them remain so far apart? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed. Because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as Maya Rodriguez pushed her cleaning cart down the empty hallway of the Pinnacle Tech headquarters. It was nearly midnight, the massive glass building now quiet, except for the occasional security guard and the night cleaning crew. Maya preferred the solitude of the night shift. Fewer executives to dodge around, fewer judgmental glances from employees who looked through her as if she were invisible. At 28, this wasn't where Maya had imagined she'd be. With a nursing degree gathering dust and mountains of medical school debt weighing her down, the janitorial position had been meant to be temporary. 3 years later, she was still here, cleaning the offices of people who made more in a day than she did in a month. "Almost done, Maya," called Hector, her supervisor, poking his head around the corner. "Just the executive floor left," she replied, forcing a smile. The executive floor, the 50th floor, was both the easiest and the hardest. Easiest because the executives were rarely there at midnight. Hardest because the opulence of their offices was a constant reminder of the vast divide between her world and theirs. "Be quick," Hector warned. "I heard Mr. Reid is working late tonight." Maya nodded, her stomach tightening. Alexander Reid, the 35-year-old CEO and founder of Pinnacle Tech, was notorious for his exacting standards and fierce temper. No one wanted to get in his way, especially not the cleaning staff. The elevator ride to the 50th floor was swift and silent. As the doors opened, Maya was greeted by darkness, broken only by a sliver of light coming from the end of the hallway. The CEO's office. Great, she thought. Mr. Reid was indeed working late. She began with the offices furthest from his, moving efficiently, emptying trash cans, wiping surfaces and vacuuming carpets. The personal touches in each office told stories of lives she could only imagine. Family photos on desks, expensive artwork on walls, awards and achievements proudly displayed. As she approached the CEO's office, Maya slowed, listening for any sound that might indicate whether it was safe to enter. Hearing nothing, she knocked softly. No response. She knocked again, a little louder. "Housekeeping," she called. Still nothing. Maya hesitated, then turned the handle and pushed the door open. "Mr. Reid? I'm just here to clean." The words died in her throat. Alexander Reid was slumped over his desk, his face ashen, his body completely still. For a moment, Maya froze, her mind struggling to process what she was seeing. Then her training kicked in. The nursing education that had drained her bank account but filled her mind with vital knowledge. She rushed to his side, calling his name. When he didn't respond, she pressed her fingers to his neck, searching for a pulse. It was there, but weak and irregular. "Mr. Reid," she said loudly, shaking his shoulder. "Nothing." Maya grabbed the phone on his desk, dialing security. "Medical emergency in the CEO's office," she shouted when they answered. "Call an ambulance now." Laying him flat on the floor, Maya began CPR, the procedure she'd learned years ago flowing back automatically. 30 compressions, 2 breaths. 30 compressions, 2 breaths. Her arms ached, sweat beaded on her forehead, but she didn't stop. "Come on," she muttered, pushing down on his chest. "Don't you dare die on my shift." Minutes stretched like hours. Where was security? Where was the ambulance? She continued the compressions, her arms burning with effort. Suddenly, Alexander Reid gasped, his eyes flying open in panic and confusion. He coughed violently, struggling to sit up. "Stay still," Maya instructed firmly, her nursing voice taking over. "An ambulance is coming. You've had some kind of cardiac event." His piercing blue eyes found hers, filled with disorientation and fear, emotions she never would have associated with the imposing figure who strode through the building like he owned it. Which, of course, he did. "Who?" he began, his voice raspy. "Maya Rodriguez," she answered. I'm on the cleaning staff. Before he could respond, the office door burst open. Security guards rushed in, followed moments later by paramedics. Maya found herself pushed aside as they surrounded Alexander Reid, attaching monitors, starting an IV, lifting him onto a stretcher. As they wheeled him out, his eyes sought hers again, something unreadable in their depths. Then he was gone, leaving Maya alone in his vast office, her hands shaking with residual adrenaline, her uniform rumpled and soiled from kneeling on the floor. Hector appeared in the doorway, his face pale. What happened? Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. Mr. Reid collapsed, Maya said, her voice steadier than she felt. I performed CPR until the paramedics arrived. Dios mío, Hector whispered, crossing himself. Is he? He was alive when they took him, Maya said. That's all I know. The rest of the night passed in a blur of police statements and incident reports. By the time Maya finally left the building, the sun was rising, casting long shadows across the city streets. She was exhausted, emotionally and physically drained. On the bus ride to her small apartment in a far less glamorous part of the city, Maya couldn't shake the image of Alexander Reid's eyes meeting hers. The vulnerability she'd glimpsed in a man known for being invulnerable. The next day, Maya slept fitfully, waking to news reports about Alexander Reid's medical incident. The official statement from Pinnacle Tech was vague, mentioning only that the CEO had experienced a minor health issue and was expected to make a full recovery. There was no mention of a janitor who had saved his life. When she returned to work that evening, the building was abuzz with rumors and speculation. Maya kept her head down, doing her job quietly, avoiding the curious glances from coworkers who had somehow heard about her involvement. The big boss is asking for you, Hector told her midway through her shift, his expression a mixture of worry and awe. Mr. Reid is back? Maya asked, surprised. No. His second in command, Ms. Blackwell. She wants to see you in the executive conference room. Now. Maya's heart raced as she rode the elevator up, smoothing her uniform self-consciously. What did they want? Was she in trouble somehow? The conference room was intimidating, all glass and chrome, with views of the city skyline. Olivia Blackwell, the sharp-featured COO of Pinnacle Tech, stood when Maya entered. Ms. Rodriguez, she said, her tone clipped and professional, thank you for coming. I didn't think I had a choice, Maya replied before she could stop herself. A flicker of surprise crossed Olivia's face, quickly replaced by a tight smile. Indeed. Well, I'll be brief. Mr. Reid would like to express his gratitude for your actions last night. The doctors have confirmed that your prompt intervention saved his life. Maya shifted uncomfortably. Anyone would have done the same. Perhaps, but it was you who did it. And you apparently knew exactly what you were doing. Olivia tilted her head, studying Maya with new interest. Your personnel file mentions a nursing degree? Yes, Maya acknowledged, wondering why that mattered now. Interesting. Olivia reached into a folder and pulled out an envelope. Mr. Reid wanted you to have this, along with his personal thanks. Maya took the envelope, feeling its weight. What is it? A token of appreciation, Olivia said smoothly. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have another meeting. Alone in the elevator, Maya opened the envelope. Inside was a check for $50,000 and a handwritten note. Thank you for saving my life. Alexander Reid. Maya stared at the check, emotions warring within her. It was more money than she'd ever held in her hands, enough to make a significant dent in her student loans, maybe even enough to get her back on track toward her original goals. But something about it felt wrong, like she was being paid off, dismissed. Like her education and skills were worth acknowledging only when they directly benefited someone important. The following week passed without incident. Maya did her job, avoided office gossip, and tried not to think about the check sitting untouched in her dresser drawer. She hadn't cashed it yet, though she wasn't entirely sure why. Then, 10 days after the incident, Maya arrived at work to find Hector waiting for her with an anxious expression. Change of assignment tonight, he said, handing her a keycard. You're cleaning Mr. Reid's penthouse. His what? Maya blinked in confusion. His private apartment. Top floor of the building. He's being released from the hospital today and requested you specifically. Hector seemed as puzzled as she was. Extra pay, of course. I don't understand, Maya said. Why would he want me to clean his home? Hector shrugged. Who knows why the rich do anything? Maybe he trusts you because you saved his life. Just do a good job, okay? This could be good for all of us. The penthouse occupied the entire top floor of the Pinnacle building. When Maya stepped out of the private elevator, she found herself in a space that seemed to belong to another world entirely. Soaring ceilings, floor-to-ceiling windows, minimalist furniture that probably cost more than her annual salary. It was beautiful but cold, she thought as she moved through the rooms. No personal touches, no photos, nothing that revealed the man who lived here. It felt more like a magazine spread than a home. She was dusting shelves in the living room when the elevator doors opened. Maya turned, expecting to see Hector or another staff member. Instead, Alexander Reid himself stood there, leaning slightly on a cane, his normally immaculate appearance somewhat diminished by his hospital stay. He still looked imposing in tailored casual clothes, his dark hair slightly rumpled, his jaw shadowed with stubble. "Mr. Reid," Maya said, startled. "I thought you weren't coming home until later." "I convinced them to release me early," he replied, his voice stronger than it had been the last time she'd heard it. "I don't do well with hospitals." An awkward silence stretched between them. Maya was acutely aware of how out of place she was in his rarefied space, dressed in her cleaning uniform. "You didn't cash the check," he said finally. Maya blinked, surprised that he would know that. "No, I didn't." "May I ask, why not?" She hesitated, then decided honesty was the best approach. It felt wrong, like you were paying me off for doing something any decent human being would do. Alexander Reid studied her for a long moment, his blue eyes intense. Then, unexpectedly, he smiled. A genuine expression that transformed his austere features. "That's exactly what my father said you would say." "Your father?" Maya asked, confused. "Joseph Reid. He was admitted to the same hospital 2 days after me. Congestive heart failure. He mentioned meeting, quote, a remarkable young woman from my company who came to volunteer in the cardiac ward during her off hours. He described you perfectly." Alexander moved to sit on one of the sleek sofas, gesturing for her to join him. "You saved my life, then spent your free time helping my father and other patients, yet you won't accept money that could help you." Maya remained standing, uncomfortable with the invitation to sit as if they were equals. "I didn't know he was your father, and I volunteer because it keeps my skills sharp, not for recognition." "The nursing skills you're not using professionally," Alexander observed. "Why is that, Ms. Rodriguez?" "That's personal," she replied, suddenly defensive. "Fair enough." He nodded, seeming to respect her boundary. "But it does raise questions. You're clearly overqualified for janitorial work." "Sometimes life doesn't go according to plan," Maya said, an edge creeping into her voice. "Not all of us have the luxury of perfect trajectories." Instead of being offended, Alexander looked thoughtful. "No, we don't." He gestured to his cane. "Case in point." Maya felt a flicker of shame at her assumption that his life had been nothing but privilege and success. Heart problems at his age suggested otherwise. "I apologize," she said. "That was presumptuous of me." "It was honest," he corrected. "I prefer honesty to deference." Another silence fell, less awkward this time. "My father likes you," Alexander said finally. "He said you treated him like a person, not a patient or a rich man. That's rare in his experience. In mine, too." Maya didn't know how to respond to that. She glanced at her cleaning cart, uncertain whether to continue working or leave. "I have a proposition for you, Ms. Rodriguez," Alexander said, straightening slightly. "Not charity, not a payoff, but a job offer." "A job offer?" Maya repeated, confused. "I need a personal health assistant during my recovery. Someone with medical training who isn't intimidated by me, who won't coddle me or let me push too hard. The doctors insist on it as a condition of my returning to work." Maya stared at him, sure she had misheard. "You want to hire me? As a nurse?" "As a personal health assistant," he corrected. "The position would include monitoring my vitals, managing my medication schedule, accompanying me to doctor appointments, and essentially ensuring I don't work myself into another cardiac event. The salary would be commensurate with your qualifications, significantly higher than your current position. Maya's mind raced. It sounded too good to be true. Why me? You could hire any nurse in the city. I could, Alexander agreed. But I don't trust easily, Ms. Rodriguez. You've already proven yourself in 2 ways. You saved my life without hesitation, and you refused payment for doing so. That suggests both competence and character. He paused. My father's endorsement merely confirmed what I already suspected. Maya hesitated, sensing this decision could change the course of her life. I would need to think about it. Of course. Alexander reached into his pocket and handed her a business card. My private number. Call me when you've decided. As Maya rode the elevator down, the card felt heavy in her pocket. The offer was tempting, a chance to use her medical training again to earn a real salary, to potentially get her life back on track. But it would also mean working closely with Alexander Reid, a man whose world was so different from hers. A man who had the power to give her this opportunity but also to take it away. A man whose piercing blue eyes seemed to see more than she wanted to reveal. What Maya couldn't know, was that as Alexander Reid watched her leave, he was already making plans. Plans that went far beyond a simple employment arrangement. Because in those critical moments when she had kept his heart beating, something had shifted in Alexander Reid's carefully ordered existence. And for the first time in years, he found himself obsessed with something other than his company's bottom line. In her small apartment that night, Maya sat at her kitchen table, staring at Alexander Reid's business card. The glossy surface reflected the dim light, the embossed letters seeming to mock her indecision. The smart thing would be to accept his offer. The salary he'd mentioned would solve so many of her problems, help her chip away at her mountain of debt, maybe even allow her to move to a safer neighborhood. And it would mean using her medical training again, keeping those hard-earned skills from fading completely. But Maya had learned the hard way that opportunities that seemed too good to be true usually were. 3 years ago, she'd been engaged to a surgical resident who had promised her the world, support through medical school, a future together in medicine. Then he'd left her for an attending physician, leaving Maya with broken dreams and the full burden of her student loans. She'd been naive then. She wouldn't make the same mistake again. Still, this was different. This wasn't a relationship, it was a job, a chance to reclaim some of what she'd lost. Maya picked up her phone and dialed the number on the card before she could talk herself out of it. Alexander Reid answered on the second ring, his voice alert despite the late hour. Ms. Rodriguez, have you made your decision? I have questions first, Maya said, determined to go into this with her eyes open. What exactly would this position entail? Hours? Responsibilities? Duration? Direct and practical, Alexander noted, approval in his tone. The position would be full-time during my recovery. Doctors estimate 3 to 6 months. Hours would be somewhat flexible but generally align with my work schedule. As for responsibilities, they would include monitoring my health metrics, ensuring I take prescribed medications, accompanying me to medical appointments, and intervening if I push myself too hard. And after your recovery? Maya asked. That would be up to you, Alexander replied. The position could evolve into something permanent if we both find the arrangement beneficial. If not, I would provide an excellent reference and placement assistance. It sounded reasonable, almost too reasonable. What's the catch? Alexander was silent for a moment. The catch, as you put it, is that I'm not an easy person to work with. I'm demanding, impatient, and accustomed to getting my way. You would be spending considerable time with me, often in high-pressure situations. It won't be easy. His honesty was surprising and strangely reassuring. When would you want me to start? Tomorrow, if possible. I'm returning to the office, against medical advice. Maya took a deep breath. I'll do it, but on one condition. Which is? I'm not just a decoration or a box to check for your doctors. If I say you need to rest or adjust your schedule, you actually listen. Otherwise, what's the point of hiring me? There was a pause, then a soft chuckle. Ms. Rodriguez, I believe you may be exactly what I need. Shall we say 8 a.m., my office? I'll be there, Maya confirmed, already wondering if she was making a huge mistake. The next morning, Maya arrived at Pinnacle Tech, Dressed, not in her cleaning uniform, but in the most professional outfit she owned, a simple navy dress and blazer she'd worn to job interviews before settling for the janitorial position. She'd pulled her dark hair back into a neat bun, applied minimal makeup, and done her best to look the part of a healthcare professional rather than the woman who had been emptying trash cans a few days ago. The security guard, who had always barely acknowledged her, now looked at her with confusion, checking her ID badge twice before letting her through. "Mr. Reid is expecting me," Maya said with more confidence than she felt. The elevator ride to the executive floor felt different this time. People looked at her curiously, wondering who she was, why she was heading to the CEO's domain. Maya kept her expression neutral, her posture straight, refusing to show how out of place she felt. Olivia Blackwell intercepted her outside Alexander's office, her sharp eyes taking in Maya's transformation. "Ms. Rodriguez, quite the career advancement." "Ms. Blackwell," Maya nodded, keeping her tone professional. "Is Mr. Reid available?" "He's on a call," Olivia replied. "He asked me to get you settled." She opened a door adjacent to Alexander's office, revealing a small but elegantly appointed room. "This will be your workspace when he doesn't need you present." The room contained a desk with a computer, a small medical monitoring station, and a seating area. It was more space than Maya had ever had in a workplace. "Your contract and confidentiality agreements are on the desk," Olivia continued. "Sign them before Mr. Reid finishes his call." She paused, studying Maya with an unreadable expression. "A word of advice? Don't get too comfortable. Alexander Reid cycles through staff quickly when they don't meet his standards. And his standards are impossible." With that parting shot, she left, closing the door behind her. Maya took a deep breath, moving to the desk to review the documents. The salary listed made her eyes widen. It was more than 4 times what she'd been making as a janitor. The benefits package was equally generous, but the confidentiality clauses were extensive and strict, making it clear that anything she learned about Alexander Reid or Pinnacle Tech was to remain absolutely private. She was just signing the last page when the door opened and Alexander strode in, looking every inch the powerful CEO in a perfectly tailored suit. The only hint of his recent health crisis was a slight pallor and the silver-handled cane he still used. "Ms. Rodriguez," he said, his eyes quickly assessing her. "You look different." "Professional attire seemed appropriate," she replied, rising from the desk. "It suits you." He gestured to the documents. "Everything in order?" "Yes, though the salary is more than we discussed." "It's what the position is worth," Alexander said dismissively. "My schedule today includes back-to-back meetings until 2 p.m., then a working lunch, followed by a board update at 4. I'll need you to monitor my vitals before and after each session and ensure I take my medication at the prescribed times." Maya nodded, already mentally calculating the best approach. "I'll need a baseline first, and I'd recommend breaking up those back-to-back meetings with short rest periods." Alexander frowned slightly. "That's not how I work. It's how you'll need to work if you want to avoid another collapse," Maya said firmly. 5 minutes between meetings. That's all I'm asking to start." For a moment, they stared at each other, a silent battle of wills. Then, surprisingly, Alexander inclined his head in acceptance. 5 minutes. We'll try it your way." And so began Maya's new role as health guardian to one of the most powerful men in the city. The first few days were a whirlwind of adjustments and negotiations, Alexander pushing to maintain his punishing schedule, Maya insisting on the modifications his recovery required. She quickly learned when to stand firm and when to compromise, developing a sixth sense for when he was pushing himself too hard. For his part, Alexander seemed both frustrated by and appreciative of her interventions. He complained about the interruptions, but grudgingly admitted that the short breaks between meetings left him sharper and more focused. By the end of the first week, they had established an uneasy truce, a working relationship built on mutual respect if not quite comfort. Maya was diligent and professional, keeping her interactions with Alexander strictly business. He, in turn, treated her with a courtesy that surprised those accustomed to his demanding nature. But beneath the surface, currents were shifting, changing the landscape in ways neither of them fully recognized. The first indication came when Maya accompanied Alexander to a follow-up appointment with his cardiologist. Sitting in the waiting room of the private medical facility, surrounded by wealthy patients giving her curious glances, Maya felt acutely out of place. "They're wondering who you are," Alexander said quietly, noticing her discomfort. "I'm sure they've figured it out," Maya replied. "The help." Alexander frowned. "You're not the help, Ms. Rodriguez. You're a healthcare professional whose expertise I value." Before Maya could respond, a nurse called Alexander's name. As they followed her to an examination room, Maya couldn't help but notice how Alexander's usual commanding presence seemed diminished in this setting. His grip on his cane tightened, his jaw clenched with tension. "You don't like hospitals," she observed as they waited for the doctor. "Is it that obvious?" Alexander asked dryly. "Only to someone who's watching," Maya replied. Then, motivated by something she couldn't quite name, she added, "It's normal, you know. Especially after what happened." Alexander was quiet for a moment. "When I was 10, my mother died in a hospital room. Not unlike this one. Heart failure, like what nearly claimed me. I sat beside her bed for 3 days, watching the monitors, thinking if I just paid close enough attention, I could somehow keep her alive." His voice was steady, but Maya caught the undercurrent of old pain. "Ever since, these places, they remind me of how little control we actually have." The personal revelation caught Maya off guard. This was the most human she'd seen him, the most vulnerable. It didn't align with the hard-driving, ruthless businessman she'd heard so much about. "I'm sorry about your mother," she said simply. Alexander met her gaze, something shifting in his expression. "Thank you." After a pause, he added, "You're the first person at Pinnacle I've told about that." The moment was interrupted by the arrival of the cardiologist, but it marked a subtle change in their dynamic. A crack in the professional veneer, a glimpse of the person behind the power. In the weeks that followed, Maya began to see more such glimpses. Alexander working late into the night not just from ambition, but from a genuine passion for the technology his company created. His surprising gentleness with his father during their weekend visits to the elder Reid's estate. The dry humor that occasionally surfaced when he was relaxed. For his part, Alexander seemed increasingly interested in Maya's life, asking questions about her background, her education, her aspirations. At first, she deflected, keeping her responses brief and impersonal. But gradually, perhaps inevitably, she found herself sharing more. One evening, as they worked late in his office, Alexander asked directly about what had derailed her medical career. "You don't have to answer," he added, noting her hesitation. "But I'm curious about what would make someone with your obvious talent and dedication end up cleaning offices." Maya was silent for so long that Alexander thought she wasn't going to respond. Then, looking out at the city lights rather than at him, she began to speak. "I was engaged to a surgical resident I met during my nursing rotations. We had it all planned out. I'd work as a nurse for 2 years while applying to medical school. He'd finish his residency, and we'd build our careers together." Her voice was even, almost detached, but then he met someone else, an attending physician with connections, someone who could help his career. He left, and suddenly I was alone with all these plans and a mountain of debt for my nursing degree. Alexander listened without interrupting, his expression thoughtful. "I tried to stick to the plan anyway," Maya continued. "Kept working, kept applying to medical schools. But then my father got sick, lung cancer, no insurance. I used my savings to help with his care, worked double shifts to cover the bills. By the time he died, I was emotionally and financially drained. Medical school seemed impossible. And after a while, I couldn't even bear to work in healthcare anymore. Too many reminders of what I'd lost, what I'd failed to achieve." "So you took the janitorial position," Alexander concluded softly. Maya nodded. "It was supposed to be temporary. Just until I got back on my feet. But temporary has a way of becoming permanent when you're just trying to survive day to day." Alexander was quiet for a moment, processing her story. "You didn't fail," he said finally. "You made difficult choices in impossible circumstances. There's a difference." The simple validation in his words touched something deep in Maya, a wound she'd carried so long she'd almost forgotten it was there. "Thank you for trusting me with that," Alexander added, his usual authoritative tones softened. "I know it wasn't easy. Their eyes met across the room, and something unspoken passed between them. A recognition, perhaps, that they had crossed some invisible line from employer and employee to something more complex. It was Maya who broke the moment, glancing at her watch. "It's late. You should be resting, not working." She stood, gathering her things. "And I should go." Alexander didn't try to stop her. But, as she reached the door, he called her name. When she turned, he simply said, "Maya." "Thank you." It was the first time he had used her first name. As Maya rode the elevator down to the lobby, she tried to make sense of the confusing emotions swirling within her. She had come to genuinely care about Alexander's well-being, to respect his intelligence and drive. But there was something else growing too, something she wasn't ready to name, something that had no place in their professional relationship. What she didn't know was that Alexander Reid sat alone in his office long after she'd gone, thinking about second chances and the strange twists of fate that had brought a woman who emptied trash cans to save the life of a man who had nearly forgotten how to truly live. The next morning, Maya arrived at work to find Alexander already in his office, reviewing documents with an intensity that suggested he'd been there for hours. His appearance was impeccable as always, but the slight shadows under his eyes betrayed his fatigue. "How long have you been here?" she asked, setting down her bag. Alexander glanced up, momentarily distracted. "Since 5. "Your first meeting isn't until 9, Maya reminded him, concern creeping into her voice. "We talked about this. Proper rest is essential for your recovery." "Some things can't wait," he replied, gesturing to the stack of papers on his desk. "The Meridian merger is at a critical stage." Maya moved to the medical station in the corner of his office, preparing to take his morning vitals. "Business will still be there after you've had a reasonable night's sleep." "Says someone who's never built a company," Alexander remarked, though without real bite. "Says the medical professional you hired to keep you alive," Maya countered, holding up the blood pressure cuff expectantly. With a sigh that somehow managed to convey both irritation and amusement, Alexander rolled up his sleeve. As Maya wrapped the cuff around his arm, she was acutely aware of his proximity, the clean scent of his cologne, the warmth of his skin beneath her fingers. "Your blood pressure is elevated," she noted after taking the reading, focusing on professionalism. "Not dangerously so, but higher than I'd like to see." "I wonder why," Alexander said dryly, his blue eyes meeting hers with a hint of challenge. Maya refused to be baited. "Your first medication dose is due in 30 minutes. I've also scheduled a brief walking break between your 10 a.m. and 11 a.m. meetings." "A walking break?" Alexander raised an eyebrow. "I don't recall agreeing to that." "You agreed to follow my medical recommendations," Maya reminded him. "Light exercise improves circulation and reduces stress. We'll just walk a few laps around the executive floor." Something flickered in Alexander's expression. Not the annoyance she'd expected, but something warmer, almost appreciative. "You're very good at this, you know." "At what?" Maya asked, putting away the blood pressure monitor. "Managing me without making me feel managed," Alexander replied. "It's a rare skill." The compliment caught Maya off guard. Before she could formulate a response, Alexander's assistant knocked and entered with an urgent message, breaking the moment. Throughout the morning, Maya maintained her professional demeanor, but she found herself increasingly aware of subtle shifts in their interactions. Alexander had begun seeking her input not just on health matters but on other decisions as well. In meetings, he occasionally glanced her way, as if gauging her reactions. When they walked together between appointments, their conversations strayed beyond the strictly professional, into discussions of books, ideas, even philosophy. It was during one such walking break that they encountered Olivia Blackwell in the hallway. The COO's sharp eyes narrowed at the sight of them together, her gaze lingering on the slight smile Maya had been unable to suppress at something Alexander had said. "Alexander," Olivia greeted, pointedly ignoring Maya. "The board is asking about your presentation for next week's investor meeting. They're concerned about the optics of your recent health issues." "The optics?" Alexander repeated, his voice cooling several degrees. "My health is not a PR problem, Olivia." "Of course not," Olivia backpedaled smoothly. "But perception matters in our position. Investors need confidence in your stability. I'll address it in the presentation, Alexander said dismissively. Maya, we should continue our walk. The deliberate inclusion, the clear message it sent about Maya's status, wasn't lost on either woman. As they moved away, Maya felt Olivia's stare burning into her back. She doesn't like me, Maya observed, once they were out of earshot. Olivia doesn't like anyone who has my ear, Alexander replied. She's been with the company since the beginning. Sometimes she forgets she's not the only one I trust. The casual implication that he trusted her sent an unexpected warmth through Maya. You should be careful with that, she said lightly. Trust, I mean. Alexander stopped walking, turning to face her fully. Why is that? Because I'm temporary, Maya reminded him. Here to do a job and then move on when you're recovered. Something shifted in Alexander's expression, a subtle hardening that she couldn't quite interpret. Is that what you want? To move on? The question hung between them, weighted with implications neither was ready to address. Maya was saved from answering by the chime of Alexander's phone, his father calling. I should take this, Alexander said, the moment broken. We'll finish our walk later. That evening, as Maya was preparing to leave, Alexander's father, Joseph Reid, made an unexpected appearance at the office. At 70, the elder Reid retained the commanding presence that his son had inherited, though age and illness had softened his edges. Ms. Rodriguez, Joseph greeted her warmly. How wonderful to see you in a professional capacity. Alexander told me he'd had the good sense to hire you. Mr. Reid, Maya smiled, genuinely pleased to see him. During her volunteer shifts at the hospital, she had enjoyed the elder Reid's stories and no-nonsense attitude. How are you feeling? Better every day, thanks in part to your excellent care at the hospital, Joseph replied. I've come to kidnap my son for dinner, doctor's orders. Perhaps you'd join us? Maya hesitated, glancing toward Alexander's office. That's very kind, but I wouldn't want to intrude on family time. Nonsense, Joseph waved away her concern. Besides, Alexander tells me you're practically his guardian angel these days. I'd like to hear how my stubborn son is really doing. Before Maya could respond, Alexander emerged from his office, surprise registering on his face at the sight of his father. Dad? I thought we were meeting at the restaurant. I decided to come early, Joseph explained. And I've invited Ms. Rodriguez to join us. I won't take no for an answer from either of you. Alexander's eyes met Maya's, a silent question in them. She nodded slightly, accepting the inevitable. The restaurant was an exclusive establishment overlooking the city, the kind of place Maya had never imagined dining. As they were led to a private table, she was acutely aware of the curious glances from other patrons, the whispers that followed Alexander Reid wherever he went. Ignore them, Joseph advised quietly, noting her discomfort. Half of them are just jealous they're not sitting at our table. The dinner that followed was surprisingly comfortable. Joseph had a gift for conversation, drawing Maya out with genuine interest in her background and experiences. For his part, Alexander seemed content to observe their interaction, his usual intensity softened in his father's presence. Alexander tells me you were on track for medical school before life intervened, Joseph remarked as they enjoyed their entrees. A doctor in the family would have pleased my late wife enormously. She always said the Reids needed more healing hands and fewer deal-makers. Dad, Alexander warned, a hint of tension in his voice. What? It's true, Joseph said unapologetically. Your mother was a saint for putting up with 2 generations of stubborn businessmen. He turned back to Maya. Have you considered resuming that path? Medical school? Maya smiled politely, though the question touched a tender spot. It's complicated. The timing, the finances. Finances should never stand in the way of talent, Joseph interrupted. Pinnacle has a substantial educational assistance program for employees, doesn't it, Alexander? We do, Alexander confirmed, studying Maya with an unreadable expression. Though it's typically for technology-related fields. Exceptions can be made, Joseph said with the confidence of someone accustomed to getting his way. Especially for exceptional people, Maya felt heat rising to her cheeks, uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. That's very generous, but my current focus is on Mr. Reid's recovery. Alexander, Both men corrected simultaneously, then exchanged amused glances. "You've been with my son for nearly a month now," Joseph observed. "Surely you can use his first name." Maya looked at Alexander, who nodded slightly. "If that's what you prefer, Alexander." "I do," he replied, something warming in his gaze as she spoke his name. The remainder of the dinner passed pleasantly, the conversation flowing easily between topics. Maya found herself relaxing, laughing at Joseph's stories about Alexander's childhood, contributing her own observations and experiences. As they waited for dessert, Joseph excused himself to take a call, leaving Maya and Alexander alone at the table. "I apologize for my father's not-so-subtle matchmaking," Alexander said once Joseph was out of earshot. "He means well." "Matchmaking?" Maya repeated, startled by his directness. "The doctor in the family comment?" Alexander raised an eyebrow. "He's about as subtle as a sledgehammer." Maya laughed, relieved that he'd addressed the elephant in the room. "I didn't take it seriously." "Good," Alexander said, though something in his tone suggested the opposite. After a moment he added, "Though he wasn't wrong about the educational assistance. If you wanted to pursue medical school, Pinnacle could help make that happen." Maya studied him, trying to read his intent. "Why would you do that?" "Because talent shouldn't be wasted," Alexander replied simply. "And you have remarkable talent, Maya." The way he said her name with a gentle emphasis that made it sound like something precious sent an unexpected shiver through her. This was dangerous territory, crossing lines she had carefully drawn. "I should probably go," she said, suddenly needing distance. "It's getting late, and you have an early meeting tomorrow." Alexander didn't try to persuade her to stay, but as he signaled for the check, he said quietly, "Think about it. The offer is genuine, regardless of anything else." The ambiguity of his final words followed Maya home that night, echoing in her mind as she tried to make sense of the shifting dynamics between them. Alexander Reid was her employer, a man from a world so different from hers that they might as well be from different planets. Any other interpretation of their relationship was fantasy. And yet, as she drifted off to sleep, it was the memory of his eyes holding hers across the table that followed her into dreams. The next morning brought an unexpected disruption to their established routine. Maya arrived at the office to find Alexander in the midst of what appeared to be a crisis, surrounded by his executive team. "What's happening?" she asked Olivia, who was hovering at the edge of the group. For once, the COO seemed too preoccupied to be hostile. "Security breach? Someone hacked into our developmental servers last night. They may have accessed proprietary algorithms for the new AI platform." Maya stayed back, knowing this was beyond her domain. But as the meeting continued, she noticed Alexander becoming increasingly tense, his voice sharpening, his movements more agitated. When he dismissed the team to implement containment protocols, she approached cautiously. "Your color isn't good," she observed. "Let me check your vitals." "Not now, Maya," Alexander said dismissively, returning to his computer. "Yes, now," she insisted, standing her ground. "Stress is a significant trigger for cardiac events. This is exactly when you need monitoring." Alexander looked up, clearly preparing to argue, but something in her expression must have reached him. With a resigned sigh, he extended his arm for the blood pressure check. The reading was concerning, significantly elevated from his baseline. "This is too high," Maya said firmly. "You need to take a break." "That's not possible right now," Alexander replied, already turning back to his work. "It wasn't a suggestion," Maya said, using the authoritative tone she'd perfected during her nursing days. 20 minutes. That's all I'm asking. A short walk, some deep breathing exercises, and your medication. Then you can return to the crisis with a clearer head." Alexander stared at her, conflict evident in his expression. Then, surprisingly, he nodded. 20 minutes. Not here, though. Too many interruptions. They took the private elevator to the roof garden, a space Maya hadn't known existed. The contrast with the tense atmosphere of the office was immediate. Fresh air, greenery, and a stunning view of the city spread out below them. "This is beautiful," Maya said, taking in the carefully tended plants and comfortable seating areas. "I had no idea this was up here. It was my mother's project, Alexander explained, his voice softening. She believed every workplace should have a connection to nature, a place to breathe. He moved to a stone bench, partially sheltered by flowering vines. This was her favorite spot. Maya joined him, careful to maintain a professional distance despite the intimate setting. Your mother sounds like she was a remarkable woman. She was, Alexander agreed. Compassionate, brilliant, stubborn as hell when she believed in something. A hint of a smile touched his lips. Rather like someone else I know. The comparison caught Maya off guard. Before she could respond, Alexander continued. She would have liked you, I think. She had no patience for people who treated me like I was made of glass after my first heart episode when I was 25. Neither do you. You had a previous cardiac event? Maya asked, surprised. This hadn't been in his medical records. Alexander nodded. Not as severe as this one. I was finishing my MBA, pushing too hard, sleeping too little. One day, I collapsed during a presentation. The doctors called it stress-induced cardiomyopathy. Essentially, my heart was temporarily weakened by extreme stress. And you didn't think this was relevant information to share with your health assistant? Maya asked, unable to keep the edge from her voice. It was a decade ago, Alexander said defensively. I recovered completely. Until you didn't, Maya pointed out. Patterns matter in cardiac care, Alexander. A history of stress-related cardiac issues significantly changes how we approach your recovery. He had the grace to look somewhat abashed. You're right. I should have told you. The simple acknowledgement diffused Maya's frustration. What else haven't you told me that might be relevant to your care? Alexander was quiet for a moment, seeming to debate internally. Then, with a decisiveness that characterized his approach to everything, he rolled up his sleeve further than was necessary for blood pressure readings, revealing a long, jagged scar that ran from his inner elbow nearly to his wrist. When I was 17, he said matter-of-factly, after my mother died, I made a very poor decision. My father found me in time. He met her gaze directly, no shame or evasion in his eyes. It's not in my medical records, because my father made sure it wasn't. But since we're being thorough about my medical history, I thought you should know. Maya's medical training kept her expression neutral, though inside her heart constricted at the pain behind his words. Without thinking, she reached out, her fingers lightly tracing the scar tissue. I'm sorry you were in so much pain. Alexander's eyes widened slightly at her touch, but he didn't pull away. It was a long time ago. I was young, drowning in grief and guilt. Guilt? Maya asked softly. I was supposed to be with her that day, Alexander explained, his voice distant as if recalling a story about someone else. She'd asked me to accompany her to a doctor's appointment. I was 17, self-absorbed, had plans with friends. I told her I'd go next time. His jaw tightened. There wasn't a next time. She collapsed in the parking lot after her appointment. By the time they got her inside, it was too late. That wasn't your fault? Maya said gently. Logically, I know that now, Alexander acknowledged. But logic has little power over a 17-year-old's guilt. For years, I was convinced that if I'd been there, somehow I could have saved her. The parallel to their own situation, Maya being there when Alexander collapsed, hung unspoken between them. Is that why you hired me? Maya asked, the question that had lingered in her mind finally surfacing. Because I was there when you needed someone? Alexander considered this, his gaze thoughtful. Initially, perhaps. But that's not why I want you to stay. The shift from past to present, from professional rationale to personal desire, changed the atmosphere between them. Maya withdrew her hand from his arm, suddenly aware of how far they'd strayed from the health monitoring that had been their original purpose. Your 20 minutes are up, she said, her voice steadier than she felt. We should get back. As they rode the elevator down in silence, Maya tried to process what had just happened. Alexander Reid had revealed parts of himself few people ever saw. Vulnerability, pain, regret. And in doing so, he had become more to her than just an employer or patient. He had become real in a way that made maintaining professional distance increasingly difficult. What she didn't yet understand was that for Alexander, the transformation had already occurred. The woman who had saved his life, who challenged him daily, who touched his scars without flinching, had broken through barriers he'd spent years constructing. And now, faced with the possibility of her eventual departure, he was quietly formulating plans to ensure that didn't happen. The security breach consumed the next several days, with Alexander working longer hours than Maya approved of but couldn't entirely prevent. She monitored him closely, insisting on regular breaks and proper meals, becoming adept at reading the subtle signs of fatigue before they became dangerous. During this intense period, their relationship continued its subtle evolution. The line between professional and personal blurred further with each conversation, each shared moment of stress or triumph. They developed a shorthand, anticipating each other's needs and responses. The executive team began to treat Maya not just as Alexander's health monitor, but as someone with influence, someone whose opinion mattered to the CEO. Even Olivia's initial hostility had evolved into a grudging respect, though her sharp eyes missed nothing of the changing dynamic between Maya and Alexander. "You're playing a dangerous game," Olivia remarked one evening when she found Maya alone in the break room. "I've known Alexander for 10 years. He doesn't get attached easily, but when he does, it's absolute. Are you prepared for what that means?" Maya stiffened. "I'm doing the job I was hired to do." "We both know it's more than that now," Olivia replied, her tone surprisingly lacking its usual edge. "I'm not saying this to threaten you. Consider it friendly advice. Alexander Reid exists in a world of wealth and power most people can't imagine. Relationships across those lines rarely end well." Before Maya could respond, Olivia added, "Just be certain of what you want before this goes any further, for both your sakes." The warning, delivered without obvious malice, lingered in Maya's thoughts as she continued her daily routine with Alexander. Was Olivia right? Was she setting herself up for inevitable heartbreak by allowing these feelings to develop? The opportunity to step back came unexpectedly the following week. Alexander's cardiologist reported excellent progress in his recovery and approved a reduced monitoring schedule. There was no longer a medical necessity for Maya to be present full-time. "We should discuss transitioning your role," Alexander said when they reviewed the doctor's report in his office. "Perhaps 3 days a week instead of 5, focusing on the days with board meetings or significant stress points." It was the logical next step, exactly what Maya should want. A gradual return to independence for Alexander, a chance for her to create some distance before she became any more emotionally entangled. Instead, she felt an unexpected sense of loss. "If that's what you think is best," she said carefully. Alexander studied her, those piercing blue eyes seeing more than she wanted to reveal. "It's not about what I think is best," he said finally. "The medical recommendation is clear, but that leaves us with a decision to make." "What decision?" Maya asked. "Whether this relationship remains purely professional, or if we acknowledge that it's become something more." Alexander's directness was both terrifying and exhilarating. "I think we both know it has, at least for me." Maya's heart raced, her carefully maintained composure threatening to crack. "Alexander, You don't need to answer now," he interrupted gently. "In fact, I'd prefer you didn't. Take the weekend. Think about what you want, not what you think you should want or what's expected. I'll respect whatever decision you make." The offer was generous, giving her space to consider without pressure. But as Maya left the office that Friday evening, she knew that no amount of time would change the fundamental reality. She had fallen for Alexander Reid, against all logic and self-preservation. The question wasn't whether she had feelings for him. The question was whether acting on those feelings would lead to anything but eventual heartbreak. The weekend stretched before Maya like a vast, open sea, 48 hours to make a decision that could alter the course of her life. She spent Saturday cleaning her small apartment with furious energy, as if scrubbing away dust could somehow clear her mind. By Sunday morning, restlessness drove her to the community clinic where she sometimes volunteered, hoping that focusing on others might provide clarity about her own situation. The clinic was busier than usual, understaffed and overwhelmed with patients. Maya slipped easily into her nursing role, triaging cases, checking vitals, providing the care that had once been her calling. For a few hours, thoughts of Alexander Reid and the decision awaiting her faded into the background. "You're good at this," observed Dr. Patel, the clinic director, as they took a brief break between patients. "Natural instinct, solid training. Why aren't you doing this full-time?" Maya gave him the simplified version of her story: financial setbacks, personal losses, the derailment of her original path. Dr. Patel listened with the focused attention of someone accustomed to finding the heart of a problem. "Life rarely follows a straight line," he said when she'd finished, "especially for those of us in healthcare. My own journey took me from a prestigious hospital position back to this neighborhood clinic where I grew up." He smiled slightly. "The pay is worse, but the purpose is better." "How did you know it was the right choice?" Maya asked, the question encompassing more than just career decisions. Dr. Patel considered this. "I ask myself what I would regret more, taking the risk and possibly failing, or never taking the risk at all." He studied her thoughtfully. "You're at a crossroads, aren't you? Something beyond just returning to nursing." Maya nodded, unable to articulate the complexity of her situation. "Fear of failure is a poor compass," Dr. Patel said gently. "So is fear of happiness. Trust your instincts, Maya. They've guided you well so far." His words followed her through the remainder of her shift, and into the evening as she walked home through streets gradually transitioning from daylight to dusk. Trust your instincts. Her instincts had led her to stop when she found Alexander collapsed, to perform CPR when seconds counted, to accept his job offer despite her reservations. And now those same instincts were drawing her towards something that logic insisted was impossible: a meaningful connection with a man whose world was so different from her own. As she approached her apartment building, Maya was so deep in thought that she almost missed the sleek black car parked across the street, the tall figure leaning against it with uncharacteristic uncertainty. "Alexander." He straightened when he saw her, his expression a mixture of determination and vulnerability that made her heart constrict. He was dressed more casually than she'd ever seen him at work. Dark jeans, a simple button-down shirt, no tie. It made him look younger, more approachable. "I know I said I'd give you the weekend," he began as she crossed to him. "But then I realized something. I was asking you to make a decision without all the necessary information." "What information?" Maya asked, acutely aware of curious glances from her neighbors. "Who I am outside the office," Alexander replied. "Not Alexander Reid, CEO, but just Alexander." He gestured to the car. "If you're willing, I'd like to show you." The request was so unexpected, so contrary to the careful consideration she'd planned for her decision, that Maya found herself nodding before she'd fully processed the implications. They drove in comfortable silence, leaving the city behind, following winding roads that climbed into the hills overlooking the skyline. Maya expected them to stop at some exclusive restaurant or private club, the kind of place someone like Alexander would naturally gravitate toward. Instead, he parked at the entrance to a public hiking trail, now empty as evening approached. "This isn't what I expected," Maya admitted as they began walking along the dirt path. "That's rather the point," Alexander replied with a small smile. "Everyone has expectations of Alexander Reid. Very few people know who I am when I'm not fulfilling those expectations." The trail was beautiful, winding through trees and occasionally opening to reveal stunning views of the city below. As they walked, Alexander began to talk. Not about Pinnacle or business or his recovery, but about himself. The astronomy phase he'd gone through as a teenager, building a telescope with his father. His secret love of science fiction novels. The year after college, he'd spent backpacking through Europe, working odd jobs before returning to take his place in the family business. "My father thought I was having an extended adolescent rebellion," Alexander confessed as they reached a viewpoint overlooking the glittering city. "In reality, I was terrified of failing. The Reid name comes with expectations, responsibilities. I needed to be sure I was ready." "Were you?" Maya asked, genuinely curious. "Ready, I mean?" "No," Alexander laughed softly. "Not even close. But I learned something important during that year. No one ever feels completely ready for the things that matter. At some point, you have to take the leap and trust that you'll figure out how to fly on the way down." There was wisdom in his words that resonated with Maya's current dilemma. Some decisions couldn't be made through careful analysis. They required faith in oneself and in the possibilities of an uncertain future. "What about you?" Alexander asked, turning the conversation to her. "What does Maya Rodriguez do when she's not saving lives or monitoring stubborn CEOs?" The question was asked with genuine interest, free from the power dynamics that usually colored their interactions. In this setting, away from the office, they were just two people getting to know each other. So Maya told him about her love of classic movies, her volunteer work at the clinic, the community garden plot she tended when time allowed. She described growing up in a neighborhood where everyone knew everyone, where her mother had taught her to make tamales using a recipe passed down through generations. "I'd like to try those tamales someday," Alexander said, his voice warm with something more than casual interest. "My mother always said you could tell a lot about a person by how they approached food," Maya replied, smiling at the memory. "Whether they savored it or rushed through it, whether they appreciated the care that went into preparation." "And what would she say about me?" Alexander asked. Maya considered this, remembering the deliberate way he ate, how he always acknowledged the quality of a meal. "She'd say you were raised with manners, but have learned to appreciate simple pleasures. That you pay attention to details others miss." Something shifted in Alexander's expression, a softening around his eyes. "I wish I could have met her." The simple statement, with its implication of a shared future that might have been, created a moment of connection that transcended their differences. As darkness fell completely, they made their way back to the car, their conversation flowing easily between topics both profound and trivial. Maya found herself laughing more than she had in years, discovering a playful side to Alexander that rarely emerged in the corporate environment. When they reached her apartment building, Alexander walked her to the door, the air between them charged with unspoken possibilities. "Thank you for tonight," Maya said, searching for words that could encompass all she was feeling. "For showing me." "The real me?" Alexander supplied when she faltered. "All of you," Maya corrected. "The CEO and the backpacker, the businessman and the stargazer. They're all real, all parts of who you are." Alexander's eyes held hers, the intensity of his gaze making her breath catch. "And is that someone you could?" He paused, recalibrating. "Have you made your decision, Maya?" In that moment, standing in the soft glow of the streetlight, Maya realized that she had. Perhaps she'd made it the moment she saw him waiting for her, or during their walk as layers of pretense fell away, or now as he looked at her with hope and uncertainty intermingled. "Yes," she said simply. Alexander waited, not pressing, giving her space to find her words. "I want to see where this goes," Maya continued. "Not as your employee or your nurse, but as myself. Just Maya." Relief and joy transformed Alexander's features. Slowly, giving her time to step back if she wished, he leaned forward and kissed her, a gentle, questioning kiss that asked rather than demanded. Maya responded with a certainty that surprised her, her hands coming up to rest lightly on his chest, feeling the strong, steady beat of the heart she had once restarted. When they separated, Alexander kept her close, his forehead resting against hers. "I should warn you," he said softly. "I don't do anything halfway. Not business, not recovery, and certainly not this." "I wouldn't expect otherwise," Maya replied, a smile in her voice. "Just remember, neither do I." Their beginning was not without complications. Maya immediately resigned from her position as Alexander's health assistant, insisting on a clean break between their professional and personal relationships. Alexander respected her decision but offered an alternative, a position in Pinnacle's newly expanded employee wellness program where her nursing skills would benefit the entire company. "It's still too connected to you," Maya argued during a dinner at her small apartment, where Alexander looked endearingly out of place among her mismatched furniture. "I need my own path, independent of your influence." "Is that what you're worried about?" Alexander asked, understanding dawning. "That people will think you're succeeding because of our relationship?" "Wouldn't they?" Maya challenged. "Wouldn't you, in their position?" Alexander considered this honestly. "Perhaps. But does others' perception matter more than the opportunity itself?" "It matters to me," Maya said firmly. "I've worked too hard to have my accomplishments dismissed as favoritism." Rather than trying to persuade her, Alexander surprised her by simply listening, then nodding. "All right. What do you want to do instead?" The question, open and supportive rather than dismissive, confirmed for Maya that she'd made the right decision in giving their relationship a chance. Alexander didn't need to agree with her to respect her perspective. "I'm thinking of accepting Dr. Patel's offer at the community clinic," she told him. "Full-time nursing while I apply to medical schools for next fall." Alexander's expression brightened. "Medical school? You're going to pursue it again?" Maya nodded, a quiet determination in her eyes. "Someone recently reminded me that no one ever feels completely ready for the things that matter. Sometimes, you have to take the leap." The smile that spread across Alexander's face was one of genuine pride. "You're going to be an extraordinary doctor, Maya Rodriguez." "First, I have to get accepted," she reminded him, though his confidence was infectious. "You will," Alexander said with absolute certainty. "And when you do, I hope you'll let me celebrate with you, even if I had nothing to do with making it happen." His understanding of her need for independence, his willingness to support her dreams without trying to control them, deepened Maya's growing feelings for him. This wasn't the demanding, driven CEO the world knew. This was Alexander, the man who had shown her his scars and listened to her fears, who valued her strength as much as her compassion. As weeks turned into months, their relationship flourished, despite the obvious contrasts in their lives. Alexander introduced Maya to his world gradually. Quiet dinners at exclusive restaurants, weekend trips to coastal retreats, the occasional gala or charity event where she increasingly held her own among the elite. For her part, Maya brought Alexander into the community she'd been part of for years, the clinic where she now worked full-time, the neighborhood festivals celebrating diverse cultures, the authentic local restaurants where owners greeted customers by name. They navigated these differences with honesty and humor, learning from each other, growing together in ways neither had anticipated. Alexander became a regular volunteer at the clinic's fundraising events, leveraging his business connections to secure much-needed donations. Maya helped him establish a more comprehensive wellness program at Pinnacle, one that recognized the human needs of employees beyond mere productivity. Joseph Reid watched their relationship develop with unconcealed delight, welcoming Maya into family dinners and traditions with open arms. "You've brought my son back to himself," he told her one evening as they sat on his patio watching Alexander tend to the grill with unexpected competence. "Before you, he was becoming all ambition and no heart, like I was after his mother died." "He's always had heart," Maya corrected gently. "He just needed permission to show it." "And you gave him that," Joseph said, patting her hand affectionately. "Some people save lives in an instant, others do it day by day. You've managed both with Alexander." Not everything was smooth sailing. Livia and certain board members remained skeptical of Maya's influence, concerned that Alexander's focus was shifting away from the relentless pursuit of corporate growth that had characterized his earlier leadership. The press occasionally speculated about their relationship in ways that ranged from romantic to cynical, forcing them to develop a thick skin about public opinion. And there were moments of doubt, particularly for Maya, times when the gulf between their backgrounds and resources seemed insurmountable, when she questioned whether she truly belonged in Alexander's world or he in hers. One such moment came 6 months into their relationship, after a particularly grueling week. Maya had been working extra shifts at the clinic during a staff shortage, while simultaneously preparing her medical school applications. Alexander had been dealing with a potential hostile takeover attempt, spending long hours in strategy sessions with his executive team. They had barely seen each other, communicating mainly through brief calls and texts. When they finally managed to meet for dinner at Maya's apartment, both were exhausted and on edge. "I've been thinking," Alexander said as they cleared the dishes together, a domestic routine they'd fallen into naturally. "The penthouse has far more space than I need. You're always saying your apartment is too far from the clinic, and with medical school applications. Are you asking me to move in with you?" Maya interrupted, setting down the plate she'd been drying with more force than necessary. Alexander paused, sensing her tension. "I thought it might make sense. Given our schedules, we'd see each other more." "In your space," Maya pointed out. "Your world. With your staff and your rules." Alexander frowned. That's not how I see it. But it is how it would be, Maya insisted, old insecurities rising to the surface. Alexander, do you have any idea what it's like to constantly navigate a world where you don't quite belong? Where people look at you and wonder how you got there, what you had to do to earn your place. Is that how you feel when you're with me? Alexander asked quietly, hurt evident in his voice. Maya sighed, the fight draining out of her. Not when I'm with you. When we're together, none of that matters. But the rest of the world doesn't disappear just because we wish it would. Alexander was silent for a moment, processing her words. Then, with characteristic decisiveness, he said, "You're right. I've been thoughtless." The immediate acknowledgement disarmed Maya's defenses. "You're not thoughtless," she corrected. "You're just used to solving problems directly. But some things can't be solved by throwing resources at them." "Then help me understand," Alexander said, taking her hands in his. "Help me see what I'm missing." The simple request, the willingness to learn rather than defend, was precisely why Maya had fallen in love with him. Despite his privilege and power, Alexander possessed a rare humility, the capacity to recognize his limitations and grow beyond them. "It's not about the penthouse," Maya explained, finding her way to the heart of her discomfort. "It's about maintaining my identity separate from yours. If I move into your space, become absorbed into your life, what happens to me? To the Maya who existed before you?" Alexander's expression softened with understanding. "She's the woman I fell in love with. The last thing I want is for her to disappear." The words hung between them, the first time either had explicitly spoken of love. Maya felt her breath catch, her heart racing with recognition of a truth she'd been feeling but not naming. "You love me?" she asked softly. "Completely," Alexander confirmed without hesitation. "I thought you knew." Maya shook her head, a smile beginning to form despite the tears gathering in her eyes. "I hoped. I felt the same. But we never said it." "I'm saying it now," Alexander replied, cupping her face gently in his hands. "I love you, Maya Rodriguez. Not as an extension of myself or my world, but as the extraordinary, independent, occasionally stubborn woman you are." Maya laughed through her tears at his accurate assessment. "I love you too, even when you try to solve everything with grand gestures." "About that," Alexander said, his tone becoming more serious. "What if the solution isn't you moving into my space, or me moving into yours? What if we find a new place together, something that belongs to both of us, that we choose together?" The suggestion was so perfect, so obviously right, that Maya wondered why neither of them had thought of it before. A fresh start, a shared space that represented their relationship, rather than either of their separate lives. "I'd like that," she said simply. Alexander smiled, relief and joy evident in his expression. "Good, because I've been thinking about downsizing anyway. The penthouse is impressive, but it never really felt like home." His eyes held hers, sincere and certain. "Not the way being with you does." In that moment, Maya understood something fundamental about love. Not the romantic idealization of movies and novels, but the real, messy, beautiful work of two people building something together. It wasn't about erasing differences or pretending they didn't exist. It was about creating a space where those differences could coexist, complement each other, form something stronger than either person could be alone. As they continued planning their future that night, Maya reflected on the strange path that had led them here, from a midnight emergency in a corporate office to this moment of profound connection. Life rarely followed a straight line, as Dr. Patel had observed. Sometimes the detours, the unexpected turns, led to destinations far better than the ones originally planned. 1 year to the day after Alexander's collapse, they stood together on the roof garden of the Pinnacle building, surrounded by friends, family, and colleagues for an engagement party that bridged their two worlds. Joseph Reid beamed with paternal pride. Dr. Patel from the clinic chatted amicably with Pinnacle board members, and even Olivia had come around, acknowledging that Alexander's more balanced approach to leadership had actually strengthened the company. As sunset painted the sky in brilliant hues, Alexander raised a glass to toast his fiancée. "1 year ago, my heart stopped," he said, his voice carrying across the assembled guests. Medically speaking, Maya restarted it with CPR. But the truth is more profound than that. She taught me that a heart kept safe behind walls of ambition and control isn't really living at all. He turned to Maya, his eyes reflecting the same vulnerability and strength she'd first glimpsed when he lay on his office floor fighting for his life. "You didn't just save my life that night. You showed me how to live it fully, with purpose and love and connection. For that, I will be forever grateful and forever yours." Maya, now accepted to medical school with a full scholarship from a foundation that, coincidentally, counted Joseph Reid among its board members, raised her own glass in response. "They say that crisis reveals character," she said, looking around at the diverse group of people who had become her extended family. "What Alexander's crisis revealed to me was that life's most meaningful paths aren't always the ones we plan. Sometimes they're the ones we discover when we have the courage to step off the mapped route into uncertainty." She met Alexander's gaze, seeing in it all the promise of their shared future. "I never expected to fall in love with the man whose life I saved, but now I can't imagine a greater gift than being able to build a life with someone who values not just who I am, but who I'm becoming." As applause rose around them, Alexander drew Maya close, whispering words meant only for her. "Ready for our next adventure, Dr. Rodriguez Reid?" Maya smiled, secure in the knowledge that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. The janitor who had found her calling, and the millionaire who had found his heart, both forever changed by a moment of crisis that had become the foundation for a lifetime of love. "Always," she replied, sealing her answer with a kiss that promised not just a happy ending, but a beautiful beginning. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.